Pierce Warrington prided himself on having everything under control: his jet-setting schedule, his thriving conglomerate of tech companies, and the impeccable staff that kept his lavish Manhattan penthouse running like a well-oiled machine. Yet on a stormy autumn night, as rain pummeled the floor-to-ceiling windows, he felt restless. Work had slowed into a routine that no longer thrilled him. The clubs and exclusive events he once relished seemed increasingly hollow. He had wealth beyond measure, but the spark of genuine excitement, of feeling truly alive, was missing. So when his personal phone buzzed well past midnight with an unknown number, Pierce debated letting it go to voicemail. He seldom answered unfamiliar calls. That was what assistants were for, or so he typically believed. But a strange intuition, maybe pure boredom, made him swipe the screen. "Hello?" he said, keeping his voice neutral. A soft, tentative voice responded, hesitant yet oddly soothing. "Hi, is this David? I'm sorry, it's late, but I didn't know who else to call." Pierce frowned. "I'm not David, I think you have the wrong number." "Oh," she exclaimed, then fell silent for a moment. "I'm sorry, I must have dialed incorrectly. My phone's on its last bar and I was trying to call, well, never mind. I didn't mean to bother you." Her voice trembled, as if she was anxious, or maybe upset. Before Pierce could say anything else, he heard a sniffle. His chest tightened. Someone was crying, or close to it. She might be in trouble. "It's no bother," he said gently. "Are you okay?" She paused as though uncertain whether to confide in a stranger. I've had a terrible night. My car broke down, and my friend David usually helps me, but I guess I typed his number wrong." Pierce's gaze flicked to the storm raging outside. If she was stranded somewhere. "Where are you?" he asked, fighting the concern creeping into his tone. "It's pouring tonight." A humorless laugh escaped her. "I'm on the outskirts of the city, parked on a deserted road. My phone's almost dead, and the tow service is quoting me a fortune. I was hoping David could pick me up." Her voice trembled again. "I'm so sorry. I shouldn't be dumping this on you." Pierce sighed quietly. A part of him realized he could hang up. This was no business of his. But another part, a deeper part, refused to brush off someone in distress. "Look," he said, "I know I'm a complete stranger, but I can send you a ride. I'll cover the cost. Just tell me your location, unless you'd rather I connect you to the police or something." She inhaled sharply. You do that?" "Of course," Pierce said, his confidence surprising even himself. He never typically jumped to rescue strangers, but something about her voice, raw and vulnerable, pushed him to help. Maybe it was the sense of purpose he'd been lacking, or simply human decency. "I can have a car there in 30 minutes, maybe less, if you give me an address." A quiet sniffle. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm near Eastfield and Pine, near a little diner that's closed now. My phone might die soon, but I'm wearing a red raincoat parked on the shoulder." Pierce rose from his leather armchair, already dialing the number of his personal driver on a second phone. "Okay, I'll have my driver head that way. Your name, so he knows who to look for?" "Mia," she said softly. "My name's Mia." "Well, Mia, my driver's name is Carl. Hang tight, he'll be in a black SUV. And please, stay on the line if you can. It's a rough night out there." A watery laugh escaped her. "You're unbelievably kind for a random guy I accidentally called. Thank you, really." Pierce felt a warmth spread in his chest. He gave Carl the instructions, then kept Mia company for another minute or two, listening to her slow, uneven breaths as thunder boomed. She told him her phone battery was at 5%, so they made small talk, just enough for Pierce to learn she was a freelance illustrator, that she'd been at a disappointing job interview when her car refused to start. She asked for his name, and he gave it, though he omitted his last name. "I'm Pierce," he said simply, "and I'm no hero, just a guy who picked up the phone." Her phone cut out soon after. Pierce stared at his blank screen, an uneasy weight settling in him. Would she be safe until Carl arrived? The next 15 minutes crawled by, each second intensifying his worry. Finally, Carl texted him, "Found her. She's safe. Heading to her address." Pierce exhaled in relief. That night, he hardly slept. He kept replaying that conversation in his mind, the way Mia's voice quavered, the gratitude in her words. It was a fleeting connection, a chance encounter no different from a stray beep on the radar of life. Yet for some reason, it filled him with a sense of contentment he hadn't felt in a long time. He didn't know it yet, But that single wrong number call was about to set the stage for a remarkable twist in both their lives, one that would strip away all pretense and show him a kind of genuine warmth money could never buy. The next morning, Pierce woke to scattered sunlight filtering through the penthouse windows. He squinted at the time, 7 a.m. Usually, he rose at 5 to scan the markets and finalize deals with overseas partners. But last night had been anything but usual. He felt oddly drained, yet strangely invigorated by what had happened. Over an espresso in his sleek, state-of-the-art kitchen, he checked his phone. A single text from Carl confirmed that he'd safely dropped off Mia at her apartment in Queens, and that she insisted on repaying him someday. Pierce's lips curved into a faint smile. She owed him nothing, of course. But the fact that she wanted to repay him said a lot. As he prepared to head to the office, his mind kept drifting to that phone call. Something about Mia's genuine vulnerability lingered. He realized he wanted to know if she was all right, if her car got towed, if she was able to fix it. But how does one casually contact a random stranger who dialed the wrong number? He shook his head, slightly amused at himself. He had pressing deals to close, an upcoming charity gala to host, and a team of high-powered executives counting on his leadership. Dwelling on a chance encounter was illogical. And yet, that curiosity remained. He told himself he'd put it aside, though a nagging voice reminded him that he had resources to find her number or address if he truly wanted. Pierce arrived at the Warrington Holdings skyscraper in the heart of Manhattan. A swirl of activity greeted him in the sleek lobby. Employees bustling to and from the shining elevator banks, phones ringing, the hum of corporate ambition. Typically, this gave him an adrenaline rush. Today, it felt more like white noise. He met his assistant, Sophie, on the top floor. She launched into updates, a new venture capitalist meeting next week, an urgent negotiation with a manufacturing plant in Germany, final details for the charity event. Pierce forced himself to focus, scribbling notes and giving quick decisions. By noon, he'd powered through 2 board meetings and a lunch with an influential senator. Nevertheless, he found himself picking at his meal, mind-wandering. "Pierce, are you all right?" the senator asked at one point, noticing his distraction. Pierce waved it off politely. "Just a headache," he claimed. But the truth was that Mia's quiet, trembling voice kept replaying in his head. He recalled how she apologized repeatedly for bothering him, how relieved she sounded when he offered help. And the question that nagged him, was she truly okay now? When he returned to his office, he closed the door, ignoring the stack of urgent files. With a few taps on his phone, he found Carl's number. "Carl, do you have that girl's address from last night? Or at least her phone number?" Carl responded promptly, "I only had the address for the drop-off." "She didn't give me her number. The address is in the car's GPS history." Pierce typed, "Send me the address, please." Immediately, a wave of guilt crashed over him. He was about to cross a line, delving into personal territory. But wasn't it just basic courtesy to check on someone you helped? He reasoned it was no different from calling to ensure a friend got home safely. He was simply being responsible, right? The text came through, a modest Queen's address. Pierce stared at it, heart fluttering with an unfamiliar sense of anticipation. Typically, he had zero trouble meeting women, socialites, influencers, colleagues, yet he rarely felt drawn to them beyond fleeting interest. Mia, though, she was different. They'd only spoken for minutes, yet something about her raw sincerity struck him as refreshingly real. He made a snap decision. He typed out a simple text using the number Mia had called from. He still had it in his call log. "Hey Mia, it's Pierce. The guy you called by mistake last night. Just checking to see if you're okay today. No need to reply if this is weird, just wanted to be sure." He hit send, not knowing if she'd even receive it or if that phone was dead. A hum of adrenaline coursed through him, part excitement, part anxiety. Pierce Warrington, the man who'd closed multi-million-dollar deals without batting an eye, found himself nervous over a single text to a stranger. Minutes ticked by with no response. He nearly laughed at his own foolishness. It was probably best if he let it go. If she needed help again, she'd contact him, right? Yet an hour later, as he scanned reports on foreign investments, his phone buzzed. A message from that unknown number lit the screen. "Hi, Pierce, I'm fine. Thank you so much for everything. My car's still at the mechanic's. I appreciate you reaching out. A small grin lifted his lips. He typed back, glad to hear it. If you need anything else, let me know. He hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Then he added, no pressure, but I'd love to treat you to coffee sometime just to properly meet under less dramatic circumstances. He stared at the message. Maybe it was too forward. But life was short, wasn't it? He tapped send. For a few heartbeats, he felt a swirl of nerves. She might think he was some creep, or maybe she'd laugh it off. But at least he'd tried. Her reply took longer this time, almost 15 minutes. When it arrived, his stomach flipped. Coffee sounds nice. I'm not used to Manhattan spots, but maybe you know a place? Pierce exhaled, relief mingling with anticipation. He typed back swiftly, I know a few. What's your schedule like? They exchanged a couple more texts. She was free Tuesday afternoon, in 2 days' time after a job interview. Perfect, he told her. He'd pick a cafe near the Midtown area, easy for her to reach by train. She agreed, politely, maybe a bit shy. As he confirmed the time and place, a bubbling excitement took root in Pierce's chest. An unfamiliar but welcome feeling. Sure, he was a billionaire who had wined and dined plenty of women in upscale venues. But for some reason, the promise of a simple coffee date with Mia felt more genuine than all the lavish dinners he'd arranged in the past year. The rest of the day breezed by, with a renewed sense of energy fueling him. It was irrational, but he couldn't wait for Tuesday, to put a face to that trembling voice, to learn more about the woman behind the midnight call. He had no clue how or if they might connect further. But he was strangely certain that Mia's accidental call had started something neither of them could ignore. On Tuesday afternoon, Pierce arrived early at the cozy Midtown cafe he'd chosen, a place called Fountain and Bean. It was small but charming, with rustic wooden tables, exposed brick walls, and the aroma of freshly ground coffee beans wafting through the air. He'd reserved a quiet corner table, ensuring some privacy from the usual Manhattan hustle. He debated what to wear. Typically, he sported a custom-tailored suit that broadcasted his power and wealth. But something told him that might intimidate Mia, or at least set the wrong tone. So he chose a more casual approach, a crisp navy shirt, fitted charcoal trousers, no tie. Enough to look pulled together, but not like he was stepping off the cover of a business magazine. Nerves flickered in his stomach. He tried to brush them off. He was Pierce Warrington, after all. He'd given keynotes to thousands of people, but meeting Mia felt different. No, was different. She knew nothing of his wealth or status, and he almost wanted to keep it that way, at least for now. Let her see the man first, not the billionaire. At exactly 2 p.m., a woman stepped inside, glancing around. Pierce's pulse kicked. She had wavy dark brown hair brushing her shoulders, a light jacket over a floral blouse, and jeans tucked into ankle boots. Her eyes swept the room, uncertain. Then she spotted him standing, offering a small smile and a wave. Mia approached, apologizing for being a minute or two late. Her cheeks had a faint flush from the crisp autumn air outside. "Hi," she said softly, her voice instantly recognizable even without the tremble of distress. "Thanks for inviting me." He returned her smile, surprised by how gently captivating she looked in person. "Thanks for coming. Want a coffee, tea, or anything else?" She slipped into the chair, eyes darting around the cafe. "A latte would be nice. Do they have vanilla?" Pierce nodded. "I'll check. One moment." He went to the counter, placed their orders, and returned with a number sign for their table. Mia was fiddling with the corner of a menu, looking slightly shy. Once he sat down, a silence hovered for a second. He decided to break it gently. "I'm glad we can actually meet without a downpour or mechanical disaster overshadowing everything." Mia laughed, a melodic sound that warmed him. "Me too. I still can't believe you answered that call. And then, well, everything that followed." He shrugged. "I'm just relieved you're safe. Did you manage to fix your car?" Her expression soured slightly. "Not fully. The mechanic says it needs a few new parts, and I'm scrambling to cover the cost. Part of why I had a job interview earlier. Well, that, and I need something more stable than freelance. But thank you again. If you hadn't sent a driver, I'm not sure what I would have done." The server arrived with their drinks. Mia stirred her latte, eyeing the creamy swirl of foam. Pierce took a sip of his black coffee and debated how to ask about her life without prying. "So you mentioned you're an illustrator?" She nodded, brightening. "Yeah, mostly digital illustrations, children's book art, the occasional commission from small businesses. But it's been feast or famine. Lately, more famine. So I'm looking for some stable, part-time or full-time gig to cover bills while I keep illustrating on the side." She shrugged. "You know how it is, living in the city." He smiled ruefully. "Indeed, I'm sorry it's been tough." Mia offered a resigned shrug, but her eyes glimmered with determination. "I'll manage, I always do. My parents used to say I was too stubborn for my own good." Pierce leaned forward. "Stubborn can be good. It keeps you going." She studied him a moment, a teasing light in her gaze. "And what about you? Your phone manner was super calm that night, like you were used to dealing with emergencies. You said you work in finance or something?" The half-truth he'd told her sprang to mind. "I do work in the finance industry, overseeing some investments. The bare minimum." He cleared his throat. "But it's not as glamorous as it sounds. Just a lot of spreadsheets, negotiations, things like that." She sipped her latte, eyebrows raised. "Glamorous or not, it must pay better than freelance illustration," she said with a self-conscious laugh. "I guess you're used to fancy cars and a comfortable life, which is how you had a driver who could rescue me?" He studied her, wondering how much to reveal. If she learned he was a billionaire, would that overshadow their connection? He decided to hold back for now, not to deceive, but to let them connect without the stigma of his wealth. "I do all right," he said mildly. "The important thing is that Carl was available. I'm glad it worked out." She shot him a grateful smile. "Me too." They chatted about lighter topics then, the best coffee spots, favorite pizza joints, the weirdness of city life. Mia had a gentle humor that made him laugh genuinely, and she listened with rapt attention whenever he talked, even about mundane things like rush hour traffic or office quirks. In turn, she shared about her attempts to pitch her artwork to publishers, the rejections she faced, and the dream projects she hoped to do someday. A comfortable rhythm emerged, surprising them both. Conversation flowed easily, as though they were old friends. The only hint of awkwardness came when the bill arrived. Pierce casually insisted on paying, but Mia stiffened. "You saved me from a storm and a massive towing fee. I feel bad having you pay for my latte too," she protested, rummaging through her purse for a few dollars. He placed a gentle hand over hers, halting her. "Please let me. I invited you. It's the least I can do." She hesitated, eyes darting from his face to his hand. Her cheeks flushed pink. "Well, okay, but next time I'll treat you. Fair is fair." Pierce's heart stuttered at her words. Next time. She was implying they'd meet again. He tried to suppress the grin that threatened to escape. "Deal." They left the cafe together, stepping onto the bustling midtown sidewalk. A crisp breeze rustled fallen leaves. He walked her a block to the nearest subway entrance. People hurried by, but for a moment, it felt like they were cocooned in their own small world. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, hands in his pockets. This was refreshing. Mia's smile was radiant. "Thank you. I didn't expect to enjoy coffee with a total stranger, but you're easy to talk to." He chuckled. "Likewise. And listen, if you ever need anything, car trouble or otherwise, feel free to call. And next time, hopefully no broken down vehicles." She laughed. "I'll do my best to keep the drama at bay." Then, on impulse, she stood on her tiptoes, placing a light kiss on his cheek, surprising both of them. "Bye, Pierce." He blinked, heart pounding. "Bye, Mia." She headed into the subway station, leaving Pierce standing there, cheek tingling where her lips had grazed him. A swirl of possibilities danced in his mind. He'd hardly known her a few days, but something about Mia's warmth and resilience had snagged his heart. He found himself walking back to his car with renewed energy, a smile creeping over his usually stoic features. He had no idea what might come of this unexpected connection. But for the first time in a long while, he felt that the emptiness in his life might finally be filling with genuine human warmth, something more valuable than all the fortunes in the world. Over the next week, Pierce and Mia texted sporadically. Never anything too personal, but enough to keep them in each other's orbits. She'd message him about a quirky art exhibit she visited, or a funny mishap while cooking dinner. He'd respond with a witty remark, or a recommendation for a local gallery he thought she might like. Each conversation left him wanting more. He found himself checking his phone with an uncharacteristic eagerness, a grin creeping over him whenever her name popped up. He might be in the midst of a conference call or reviewing a vital contract, yet the beep of an incoming message from Mia made him pause everything to read it. One day, she asked if he'd be interested in attending a small local fair in Queens, a cultural street fest where independent artists sold their work and local bands performed. "It's not fancy," she warned in her text, "but it's fun. I'll have a small booth there, actually trying to sell some prints. If you're free, come say hi." Pierce stared at the text, a twinge of excitement overshadowed by a wave of caution. He rarely ventured beyond Manhattan for leisure. Attending a local street fair, incognito, among crowds of everyday people, it wasn't his typical scene. Yet something in him yearned to see her world, to learn about her life outside that single coffee date. So he typed back a prompt yes. Her enthusiastic exclamation points in reply made him laugh out loud. The following Saturday, Pierce asked Carl to drive him to the address Mia provided. He debated whether to bring security. He was a billionaire, after all, and used to traveling with at least a discreet bodyguard. But he didn't want to overshadow or intimidate Mia, so he opted to go alone with Carl. He dressed in casual clothes once again, a comfortable sweater, jeans, and sneakers. The moment he stepped out of the SUV onto the busy Queen Street, the swirl of vibrant sights, smells, and sounds greeted him. Rows of vendors occupied the sidewalks, colorful canopies offering handmade jewelry, crocheted scarves, painted canvases, and more. The air smelled of street food, tacos, sizzling kebabs, fresh pastries. A small stage at the corner showcased a local band playing upbeat tunes. Families strolled by, kids clutching cotton candy, and seniors perused craft tables. It was bustling, loud, and brimming with life. Pierce took a moment to acclimate. This was far from the polished charity galas or exclusive events he usually attended, but a sense of wonder filled him. He scanned the booths looking for Mia's. Eventually, he spotted a sign reading, "Mia's Imaginarium, Illustrations and Prints." That had to be it. He approached, watching her chat with a potential customer. She stood behind a small fold-out table displaying various prints, whimsical images of animals, dreamy landscapes, and charming characters that might belong in children's books. She wore a simple maroon dress under a denim jacket, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She was animated, smiling brightly as she described her art. When the customer left, Pierce stepped forward. "Hi, stranger. Fancy seeing you here?" Mia whirled around, her face lighting up. "Pierce, you made it." She looked him over, taking in his casual outfit. "You look comfortable," she teased. He laughed, glancing at himself. "I wanted to fit the vibe. How's it going?" She motioned to her booth. "Not bad. Sold a few prints, got some compliments. Probably won't make me rich, but it's nice to share my work. Thank you for coming. I know it might be out of your comfort zone." He shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "I'm enjoying it, actually. This is a cool scene," she beamed. "I'm happy to hear that." Then she handed him one of her prints, a whimsical illustration of a cat gazing at the moon, done in soft watercolor style. "Pick whichever one you want. My treat." He admired the print. The cat had big, curious eyes, and the moon glowed in a starry sky. Something about the scene felt both serene and hopeful. "This is beautiful. Are you sure I can't pay?" "Consider it a thanks for the ride that night," she insisted gently. "Or, you can just buy me dinner if you feel guilty about not paying." Pierce's heart skipped at the implication of future plans. "Deal. Dinner's on me next time we meet." She grinned, tucking the print into a protective sleeve for him. "That's a promise." They spent the next hour strolling the fair together. Mia occasionally paused to check on her booth, but since most passers-by were just browsing, she was able to wander around with him. She introduced him to a few fellow artists, and though Pierce offered only a polite handshake and a mink, "I work in finance," he felt a strange rush at being in her world. People here were warm, open, unconcerned with his net worth. When they got hungry, they grabbed street tacos from a stand where an elderly couple served homemade tortillas. They found a small curb to sit on, devouring the spicy, savory goodness. Mia giggled as Pierce dabbed at hot sauce on his chin. He couldn't recall the last time he'd sat on a curb, wearing jeans, laughing with someone while scarfing down street food. It felt refreshingly human. At one point, she led him to a small corner stage where a local band played acoustic covers. They stood side by side, their shoulders occasionally brushing as the crowd swayed to the music. The late afternoon sun cast a gentle glow on everything. Pierce dared to slide his hand into Mia's, lacing their fingers. She glanced up, surprised, but smiled softly and squeezed back. In that moment, watching the band strum a mellow tune under a bright autumn sky, Pierce felt an undeniable clarity. He liked this. He liked her. And it wasn't just a fleeting fascination. Something about Mia, her resilience, her genuineness, her sense of wonder, drew him in like a magnet. For her part, Mia seemed equally content, leaning slightly into him. When the song ended, she nudged him gently. "You look like you're enjoying yourself." He chuckled, nodding. "I am. Thank you for inviting me." She grinned. "I'm glad. Believe it or not, this fair is my version of normal. I'm usually cooped up illustrating or hustling for gigs. It's nice to share it with you." Pierce's chest swelled, a tender sort of ache. "I'd like to see more of your normal," he murmured, the words slipping out before he could overthink them. Her cheeks flushed pink, but her expression shone with quiet joy. She opened her mouth to respond, but just then, a friend from a nearby booth called out her name, signaling a rush of new customers. She sighed, turning to him with an apologetic shrug. "Duty calls? Rain check on that talk?" He nodded, releasing her hand. "Of course, I'll hang around a bit, then head out. Text me later?" She promised she would. They parted, her returning to greet customers at her booth, him weaving through the crowd with her gifted illustration in hand. He paused near the street, taking in the swirling energy of the fair. He felt alive in a way that no corporate venture or glitzy party had ever made him feel. As he climbed back into his SUV and directed Carl to drive home, he realized with a start that something real was happening here, something that existed outside the bubble of his billionaire status. Mia saw him as Pierce, not as an ATM or a trophy bachelor. He just hoped that, when the time inevitably came to reveal who he truly was, it wouldn't break the gentle spell that was already weaving between them. In the days following the fair, Pierce juggled his growing closeness with Mia alongside the relentless demands of Warrington Holdings. Each morning, he fielded conference calls with overseas partners, negotiated deals, and wore the polished facade of a billionaire CEO. By afternoon or evening, he often found himself exchanging lively texts with Mia, laughing at her commentary on random city mishaps or discussing new sketches she was working on. He realized, with an odd pang, how refreshing it was to talk about non-corporate topics. Mia never once asked him about stock prices or upcoming acquisitions. Instead, they traded jokes about the MTA's constant delays, shared links to interesting art or architecture, and swapped stories about weird neighbors. Her daily struggles, late rent checks, unpredictable art commissions, were a stark contrast to his sphere, where money solved most problems. Yet Pierce found himself drawn to her authenticity. She faced challenges head-on, never complaining or playing victim. One evening, as the city lights glowed across the skyline, Pierce reclined in his penthouse living room, a glass of scotch in hand. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Manhattan's glittering spires. But he hardly noticed. His focus was on a text from Mia. "Had a tough day. Tried to negotiate with my landlord for a slight extension, but no go. Sigh. At least my latest painting came out well. How's your day?" His day had been replete with big wins, a new contract signed with a major tech firm, a profitable venture capital deal that netted him a tidy sum. Ordinarily, he'd revel in such successes. But now, reading Mia's note, he felt a pang of guilt at the disparity of their situations. She was worried about making rent. He could buy entire apartment buildings. Still, he typed a supportive response. "Sorry to hear that. Glad your painting went well, though. If you need a listening ear, I'm here." He hesitated, then added, "Don't let it get you down. You're talented, and sooner or later that landlord will regret losing you as a tenant." He pressed send, finishing his scotch with a thoughtful sip. The old Pierce would have simply offered to pay her rent. No second thought. But that felt wrong. He didn't want to overshadow her pride or turn their growing bond into a transactional arrangement. She'd likely refuse anyway. Her independence was integral to who she was, so he'd keep quiet, for now. Later that week, they arranged a dinner, a real date. Mia chose a modest Italian place in her neighborhood. Pierce arrived early again, tension coiling in his stomach. He'd tried to get a reservation at an upscale restaurant in Manhattan, but she gently insisted on something more laid back and cheaper, she teased. He didn't argue. When Mia walked in, he stood to greet her. She wore a simple black dress that hugged her curves modestly, a cardigan draped over her arms, and a hint of lip gloss. She looked beautiful, understated but radiant. He complimented her, and she blushed with shy pleasure. Over bowls of pasta and a shared plate of bruschetta, conversation flowed. Mia teased him about his earlier attempts to pick fancy restaurants. You might be a finance guy, but let me introduce you to the joys of local mom-and-pop places. Corporate steakhouse or no, there's nothing like real homemade spaghetti sauce. He laughed, diving into a forkful of marinara-laden noodles. If the city's top Italian restaurant critics disagree, I'll back you up. This is delicious. Their laughter mingled with the warm hum of the small dining room. The check eventually arrived, and Mia insisted on splitting it. Prosody rate percent. Pierce tried to protest politely, but she refused. You said dinner's on you next time we meet was for the print, she reasoned. This time it's on me. He marveled at her fierce independence. She was determined not to be indebted. After dinner, they strolled the neighborhood, the sidewalk lit by flickering street lamps. It was a cool night, so he offered her his jacket. She accepted, sliding into it with a grin. They passed a tiny bakery that had just closed, the air still smelling of warm bread. He ventured a question. So how did the job interviews go? Any luck? She sighed, kicking a stray pebble. Not really. A few calls, but nothing concrete. I'll keep trying. I might have to pick up some waitressing shifts again if the illustration gigs don't pick up soon. Have you thought about an online shop for your art? Expanding your presence? He asked, intrigued by the potential of her talent. She shrugged. I've tried, but I don't really have the marketing skills or funds to push it. Maybe I'll get there eventually. Pierce bit his tongue, a swirl of ideas forming. With his resources, he could launch her online presence overnight. But again, he worried about overshadowing her agency. She's not a project. She's a person, he reminded himself. If you ever need help brainstorming, I'd be happy to lend a hand, he offered gently. She gave him a grateful look. Thanks, I might take you up on that. Her steps slowed as they approached her apartment building. It was a modest complex with peeling paint, a flickering hallway light. She turned to face him, wrapping the cardigan tighter around her frame. I had a lovely time tonight, she said softly. Thank you, Pierce. He smiled, stepping closer. Likewise, this was perfect. She bit her lip, eyes flicking to his mouth. Then, with a cautious finality, she leaned in. He met her halfway, their lips brushing in a tender kiss. Warmth bloomed in his chest. Mia's arms slipped around his neck, and he cupped her waist, deepening the embrace slightly until they both pulled back, breathless. I've been wanting to do that, she whispered, cheeks flushed. He chuckled, forehead resting against hers. Me too. They lingered in the moment, hearts pounding. Eventually, she drew back, stifling a shy giggle. I guess I should go in. My landlord's an early riser, and he's not too fond of me anyway. Pierce squeezed her hands. Text me when you're free again. I'll call you tomorrow. She nodded, a sweet smile gracing her features. Good night, Pierce. Good night, Mia. He watched her slip into the building, then sighed, releasing a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Climbing back into his waiting car, he felt a surge of elation. This was real. This was deeper than any fling he'd had with glamorous socialites. Mia's gentle humor and resilience glowed brighter than any diamond necklace or exclusive event could match. Still, a faint dread nagged him. She deserved to know who he really was eventually, that he wasn't just a comfortable finance guy, but one of the wealthiest men in the city. He wondered how she would react. Would she resent him for hiding the full truth? Would she feel betrayed that he let her struggle with rent while he quietly possessed the resources to buy her building? Those questions haunted him as he sank into the back seat, heading for his penthouse. Yet for now, he savored the lingering memory of her soft kiss, telling himself he'd find the right moment to confess everything. For the first time in years, he cared deeply about forging a genuine bond, untainted by money. It was worth the risk, wasn't it? Weeks passed, and Pierce's relationship with Mia blossomed in a sweet, steady way. Small weekend outings, late night phone chats, random texts about everyday ups and downs. She sometimes teased him about being too busy with spreadsheets, and he'd grin, imagining her rosy cheeks as she joked from her cramped apartment. He continued to withhold the full truth of his identity, uncertain how or when to drop the bombshell. At the same time, the annual Warrington Holdings Charity Gala loomed. This lavish event was a highlight of New York's social calendar, drawing politicians, celebrities, and top business figures. It was a night for Pierce to shine as the philanthropic face of his empire, raising funds for various causes. He dreaded it slightly, as it was always an orchestrated, high-stakes performance of wealth and connections. Sophie, his assistant, ran through the final prep one afternoon. We have confirmations from 4 senators, multiple CEOs, and at least 2 Hollywood A-listers. The press will be out in full force, she reminded him. We should finalize your date. Usually you bring a +1 from the philanthropic world. Any thoughts? Pierce stiffened. A +1. He'd always escorted a suitable socialite or fellow executive, someone the tabloids deemed an appropriate match. But now, an unexpected possibility tugged at him. The idea of going with Mia, introducing her as his date, caused both excitement and dread. She'd see the scale of his world, realize the full extent of his wealth. Would it ruin everything? He brushed aside the thought for the moment, telling Sophie, "I might go solo this year." She gave him a curious glance but nodded. That evening, while calling Mia, he nearly broached the topic. "Hey," he began softly, "there's a big event for my company soon. Usually a black tie affair, so small. I was thinking maybe you'd like to come? It's not mandatory, of course. Might be boring." Mia's voice brightened. "A fancy event? I've never been to anything like that, but it sounds interesting. Are you sure you want me there?" He hesitated, hearing her earnest excitement. "Yes. I mean, only if you're comfortable. It's a big deal, with press and all, but I'd love for you to be my date." She let out a small laugh. "You do realize I don't own a ball gown or anything, right? My fancy dress is something I wore to a cousin's wedding once. Maybe not quite black tie level." Pierce felt warmth flood him. "We can figure something out. I'll text you the date and details. Don't worry about the dress. We'll handle it." They ended the call with mutual excitement tempered by a hint of nervousness. Over the next few days, Pierce arranged for a personal stylist to contact Mia discreetly, offering to help her find the perfect gown. He told the stylist to keep the billing off the radar, so Mia wouldn't see the extravagant price tags. She balked at first, but after some gentle persuasion, she accepted a modest budget and found a stunning, simple emerald green dress. Pierce was relieved she agreed. On the night of the gala, Pierce paced in the grand foyer of the event venue, a historic hotel's glittering ballroom. He wore a classic black tuxedo, hair perfectly styled, posture poised. Guests trickled in, greeting him with air kisses and handshakes. Everywhere, cameras flashed. He forced polite smiles, but his mind was wholly on Mia. When she arrived, guided by Sophie's direction, Pierce's breath caught. She looked radiant, the emerald dress hugging her figure, her hair pinned back in a soft updo. She scanned the opulent room, clearly overwhelmed by the glittering chandeliers and throngs of elite attendees. He stepped forward quickly, ignoring the watchers, and gently took her hand. "You look incredible," he murmured, gaze locked on her wide eyes. She reddened, glancing around. "You didn't tell me it'd be this glamorous," she whispered. "I feel like Cinderella who snuck into the ball." He squeezed her hand, ignoring the curious stares of onlookers. "You belong here as much as anyone else. Let me introduce you to a few people." She nodded, though nerves fluttered in her posture. He led her around, greeting wealthy donors and fellow CEOs. A few recognized Pierce's date from prior gossip pages. "He's bringing a non-socialite?" But he calmly brushed off any insinuations with tight smiles. Mia was gracious, if a bit shy. It wasn't long before Mia realized that Pierce was no mere finance guy. Attendees greeted him with deference, praising the Warrington vision, toasting his success. The press snapped photos, calling him a billionaire philanthropist. Her eyes widened whenever they used that phrase, as if it hammered home something she'd never fully grasped. An hour into the event, he led her to a quieter balcony off the ballroom, sensing her tension. Soft city lights sparkled outside, the noise of the gala muffled behind glass doors. She turned to him, voice trembling. "Pierce, are you actually Warrington, as in Warrington Holdings?" Her cheeks had paled slightly. He exhaled a shaky breath, nodding. "Yes, that's me. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I'm the CEO, and I started it years ago. It's grown significantly." She stared, a myriad of emotions crossing her face: confusion, awe, maybe betrayal. "You're a billionaire and you never mentioned it?" He ran a hand through his hair, heart pounding. "I was afraid. I love that you see me as just Pierce, not some wealthy figure. I didn't want money to overshadow everything we share." She inhaled, stepping back. "But you knew I was struggling to pay rent. You let me ramble about job interviews, took me to cheap dinners, all while she paused, tears threatening. "Do you know how humiliating it feels to realize I was dating a billionaire without knowing it?" His chest tightened. "I never wanted to humiliate you. I just wanted something real, untainted by my wealth. I was planning to tell you. I was just waiting for the right time." She swallowed hard, arms wrapping around herself. "I wish you'd told me earlier, before bringing me into this world so abruptly." "I'm sorry," he whispered, stepping forward. "I know it's a lot to take in. I never intended to deceive you. Everything I feel for you is real." Her lips trembled. She turned her face away, blinking back tears. "I need a moment," she finally said, voice shaky. Then, without meeting his eyes, she slipped back into the ballroom, leaving him alone on the balcony. The city lights blurred in Pierce's vision. A wave of dread crashed over him. He'd wanted so badly to forge an authentic connection, yet he might have jeopardized it all by delaying the truth. He pressed a hand to the balcony railing, inhaling the cool night air in an attempt to steady himself. He had to find her, talk to her, salvage what they had. But the question loomed. Was there anything left to salvage, or had the secret of his billions shattered the delicate bond they'd built? Pierce re-entered the ballroom, scanning the sea of elegant gowns and tailored suits in search of Mia. Soft chamber music played, but to his ears it felt discordant. People approached him with polite questions, but he brushed them off, muttering something about an urgent matter. His mind whirled with one objective: find Mia. He spotted Sophie near the dessert table, directing staff. Quickly, he asked, "Have you seen Mia?" Sophie blinked. "She went toward the exit a few minutes ago. Is everything all right?" Pierce muttered thanks and hurried off. He reached the grand marble foyer, eyes darting. Then he saw Mia near the massive doors, hugging herself. She glanced up, meeting his gaze with a mixture of hurt and uncertainty. For a moment, neither moved. Finally, he approached slowly. "Mia," he said softly, "let's talk somewhere quieter, please." She nodded, allowing him to guide her to a side corridor. The opulence of the surroundings only highlighted her discomfort. Once they stood apart from the crowd, she turned to face him, arms wrapped protectively around her torso. "I feel like such a fool," she murmured, voice trembling. "All this time you were this." She gestured vaguely at the lavish decor, implying his entire empire. "And I'm the clueless girl from Queens talking about rent. I mean, you even have a massive charity gala in your name. This is so far from my reality." He tried to keep his voice calm, though his heart pounded. "Mia, you're not a fool. I wanted you to know me as a person, not as a bank account. I was afraid you'd treat me differently, or think I was trying to buy your affection." She blinked rapidly, tears threatening. "Maybe I get that, but it hurts that you let me walk around in the dark. If you cared about me, you should have trusted me enough to tell me. Instead, you waited until I was thrown into this circus." He reached out, gently brushing her elbow. She didn't pull away, but she stiffened. "I do care. So much. I'm sorry. I thought I was protecting what we have." She bit her lip, tears finally slipping. "Pierce, if that's even your real name?" He nodded quickly, clarifying. "Pierce is my first name. Warrington is my last name. That part is real, I promise." She managed a weak laugh between tears. "All right, so you didn't lie about your name at least. Still, this is a lot. I'm overwhelmed." He rubbed the back of his neck, raw emotion coursing through him. "I understand. We can leave. I can take you home. We can talk it through, or if you need space, I'll give it to you." He hated the desperation in his own voice, but couldn't hide it. Mia sniffled, glancing around at the ornate hallway. I need some air. Let's go somewhere away from this crowd. He nodded, relief mixing with anxiety. They slipped out a side door into a quiet courtyard, illuminated by soft garden lights. The distant hum of traffic drifted over stone walls. Mia took a seat on a marble bench, arms still folded as if trying to shield herself. Pierce hovered nearby, unsure if he should sit or keep distance. "Sit," she said softly, patting the bench. He obliged, perched at the far edge. For a moment, they listened to the rustle of leaves in a faint breeze. Eventually, she spoke, voice subdued. I have 1,000 questions. Like, do you regularly go around saving strangers with your personal driver? Or was that night an anomaly?" He exhaled, recalling that fateful call. "I usually don't answer random numbers, but something compelled me. Meeting you was not planned, but it felt right, and I never regret it." She studied his face, tears drying. "I don't regret it either, but I hate feeling like we're from two different planets." He nodded, heart aching. "Sometimes it feels that way, yes. My life is complicated. I can't change the wealth or the name I've built, but the part of me you got to know, that is real. The guy who loves good coffee, admires your art, and likes strolling at street fairs. That's me, not some act." She fiddled with her purse strap. "I believe you, and I appreciate that you tried to connect without the baggage of your status. But full honesty is important, too. I've had people lie to me or hide crucial truths before, and I don't want that again." Pierce's gaze dropped, shame creeping through him. "I understand. I swear. No more secrets. Ask me anything. I'll tell you." She inhaled, bracing herself. "All right. Do you want me in your life? I mean, for real? Because if you do, it means dealing with the fact that I'm not wealthy or well-connected. I may never fit into this world." His eyes shone with fervor. "I do want you. And I don't care if you fit into high society. I barely fit myself. I'd rather be at a Queen's street fair with you than at half of these events." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "You say that now, but all these people out there expect you to maintain an image." He reached for her hand tentatively. This time, she let him hold it. "My image is mine to define," he said with quiet conviction. "And if that includes you, then I'll deal with any fallout. I'd rather have something real than keep up a facade." Her grip tightened slightly. "Okay," she murmured, tears glistening again, but softer now. I need time to process this. But I do care about you, Pierce, a lot. I need to be sure we can handle the differences." He exhaled, relief mingling with a lingering worry. "Take all the time you need. I'll do whatever it takes to show you I'm serious about us." She nodded, leaning her head on his shoulder tentatively. He wrapped an arm around her, cherishing the closeness. They stayed that way for a quiet moment, letting the night air and the distant gala music settle around them. Eventually, Mia stood, smoothing her gown. "I think I'm ready to leave. I'm not in the mood to face any more stares or questions." Pierce rose too, offering her his arm. "Let me say a quick goodbye to a few key people, then we'll go. I'll drop you wherever you like." She took his arm with a faint, wavering smile. "All right." They walked inside, and though curious glances followed them, Pierce paid them no heed. He had bigger priorities. In the elevator ride down to the lobby, Mia stayed quiet, her expression thoughtful. He worried about the future, but at least she hadn't run away. She was giving him, and them, a chance. As they emerged onto the street, cameras flashed in the distance, paparazzi sniffing around. Pierce shielded Mia from the glare, guiding her into his waiting car. The ride back to her apartment was hushed, tension crackling in the air. When they arrived, he gently squeezed her hand. "Mia, thanks for hearing me out." She nodded, gaze flicking to him with mingled affection and uncertainty. "Thank you for being honest now. We'll see where this goes, I guess." He leaned in for a soft kiss on her forehead, relieved she didn't pull away. Then she slipped out, glancing back with one last questioning look before disappearing into her building. In the silent car, Pierce leaned his head against the seat. He'd told her the truth, belatedly, but it was out. Now came the hardest part, proving that, billionaire or not, his feelings were genuine. He just hoped he hadn't lost her in the whirlwind of revelations. Over the next few days, Pierce wrestled with uncertainty. Mia had asked for time, so he limited his contact, sending only a brief text to check on her well-being. She responded politely, saying she was fine, just busy. That was all. The stark change from their usual playful banter left him hollow. It was as though an invisible wall had sprung up between them. He tried to lose himself in work, diving headlong into negotiations for a new European venture. But every deal concluded, every strategy meeting wrapped, left him feeling unsatisfied. The highlight of his day used to be hearing from Mia. Now the quietness stung. On a chilly Friday evening, as he stared out at the glittering city from his penthouse, he made a decision. He wouldn't push Mia, but he had to see her, talk face to face. So he messaged her. I'm sorry for rushing you, but could we have dinner soon? No fancy restaurants, just us. I want to know how you're feeling, no pressure. After a tense wait, she replied, Okay, tomorrow night? My place. We can cook something simple. A jolt of relief rushed through him. That sounds perfect. She gave him the address and a time. She'd apparently moved apartments, maybe to somewhere slightly cheaper or a different arrangement. He prepared anxiously, picking up groceries he thought she might like, and arriving with a bottle of wine in hand. When he knocked on the door of her modest new apartment the next evening, she greeted him with a shy smile. She wore casual clothes, sweatpants and a comfy sweater, but her hair was loosely down, framing her face. The living space was tiny, boxes still half unpacked. The faint smell of paint lingered as though she'd just moved in recently. Hi, she said quietly. Hey, he returned, stepping inside. She gestured for him to remove his shoes, so he complied, noticing a stack of illustration prints leaning against a wall. She offered him a seat on a small couch with mismatched cushions. So, I guess, welcome to my new home, she said, forcing a little laugh. It's cheaper than the last place, plus the landlord here is nicer. He nodded, glancing around. Thanks for inviting me. I brought some groceries. I wasn't sure what you had on hand. She led him to the tiny kitchenette, and they took stock of ingredients. Pasta, fresh vegetables, a jar of marinara sauce. Mia had set out a cutting board and a single battered pan. Together, they fell into a quiet rhythm, chopping bell peppers, boiling pasta. It was almost domestic, though tension underlay everything. They talked in subdued tones about her move. She'd had to scrounge for deposit money. He asked about her job prospects, and she admitted no luck yet. The unspoken question hovered between them. How does his wealth factor into all this? Once dinner was ready, they carried their plates to a small table, 2 chairs, candles flickered, adding a cozy glow to the otherwise sparse apartment. They ate mostly in silence for the first few bites. Finally, Mia set her fork down. So, I've thought a lot about us, about the fact you're a billionaire. She shook her head, as though still amazed. Part of me is angry you let me stress about rent while you own half the city. Another part of me understands why you withheld that. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to meet her gaze. I won't deny it. I debated stepping in to help, but I knew you'd hate that if you didn't have the whole story. And even then, I didn't want to overstep. She nodded slowly, picking at her pasta. I do appreciate you not swooping in like a savior. I need to stand on my own feet. It's just, there's such a gap between our worlds. How do we handle that if we move forward? Pierce exhaled. We communicate. I promise never to keep you in the dark again. I'll respect your independence, but I'll also be here if you ever want support. He paused, voice thick. I care about you, Mia. Deeply. The money, the companies, it's part of me, but it's not my heart. You are the only one who gets to see the real me. Her eyes misted. You keep saying that, and I believe you, but it's scary. I won't fit in with your social circles. I can't talk about hedge funds or philanthropic boards. And the tabloids, what if they find out you're dating a nobody? He reached across the table, covering her hand gently. First, you're not a nobody. You're Mia, an incredibly talented artist with a huge heart. Second, I can shield you from the tabloids for the most part, or face them together if it comes to that. I'm done living for the public image. She searched his gaze, tears threatening to fall. What if your business partners judge you for choosing someone outside your sphere? He squeezed her hand. They're free to judge. It won't change my decisions. My board can't dictate my personal life. A single tear slipped down her cheek. She sniffled, trying to maintain composure. You're serious about this? About us? He rose from his seat, moving around the table. She turned in her chair to face him. He knelt slightly, placing his hands on her shoulders. Yes, Mia. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. You showed me what it's like to connect with someone without the lens of wealth. I don't want to lose that. She let out a trembling breath. Then, in one fluid motion, she stood, wrapping her arms around him, her face pressed into his shoulder. He held her gently, relief and love washing through him as she sobbed quietly. After a moment, she pulled back, wiping her tears. Okay, she whispered. I'm scared, but let's try. Let's be together. His heart soared. He cupped her cheek, leaning in for a tender kiss. She responded, lips salty with tears, arms tightening around him. The worries about class differences, media exposure, and personal pride still loomed. But in that moment, they decided to face it all, together. When they broke apart, she sniffled, a watery smile creasing her lips. Dinner's getting cold, she murmured, voice thick with emotion. He chuckled softly, pressing his forehead to hers. Let's reheat it, or forget it altogether. I'm just grateful you're giving me a chance. She laughed through her tears. You're lucky you're an okay cook. That helped your case. They returned to their seats, swirling back into gentle conversation. By the end of the meal, the tension lifted, replaced by hope. It wouldn't be easy, but they had a path forward, one grounded in honesty and respect. For Pierce, it felt like a new beginning. For Mia, it was a leap of faith. They spent the rest of the evening curled up on her worn couch, sipping cheap wine from mismatched mugs. She showed him some sketches for a new children's book concept, and he listened intently, offering sincere praise. When he left that night, the sweet taste of her lips still on his, he knew with renewed certainty. Mia was worth every challenge, every risk. He'd walk away from the entire empire if that's what it took to keep her by his side. Despite their heart-to-heart, forging a life together wasn't seamless. Mia was determined to keep her independence, refusing Pierce's discreet offers to pay off her debts or buy her a better apartment. He respected her wishes, though it pained him to see her scrape by. Instead, he channeled that protective urge into more constructive avenues, like introducing her to marketing experts who could help her build a small online art presence or quietly referring potential clients who needed illustrators. But they found small joys too. On weekends, Pierce would slip away from his corporate obligations to roam the city with Mia, visiting art museums, strolling through markets, or simply curling up on her couch with takeout. Occasionally, they dined at nicer restaurants, but she insisted on paying her share if it wasn't too steep. On special nights, she relented, letting him treat her, but only after mock arguing about it. Paparazzi sightings were rare. Pierce took precautions, avoiding the usual hotspots where cameras lurked. Yet one afternoon, while walking hand in hand near a popular park, a sly photographer snapped pictures from afar. The next day, a small gossip column ran a headline, "Warrington spotted with mystery brunette." Accompanying the piece was a blurry shot of Mia's profile. That evening, Pierce braced for Mia's reaction. She'd discovered the story online, courtesy of a friend's text. When he arrived at her apartment, she seemed frazzled. "I'm in some tabloid, Pierce," she said, pacing. "They called me a mystery brunette. Next time, maybe they figure out my name, my address. I can't handle that. I'm just a normal person." He enveloped her in a comforting hug. "I'm sorry. We can lay low. Pick quieter spots. I never wanted you to deal with this invasion." She exhaled, leaning into his warmth. "I knew it was a risk. I need to get used to it, I guess." They talked it through, deciding to be more discreet with public outings, at least until the novelty wore off. Meanwhile, Mia poured more effort into her art, hoping to secure enough commissions to pay her bills comfortably. Pierce privately cheered her on, occasionally recommending her work to business acquaintances who needed original illustrations for corporate brochures or holiday cards. She accepted the jobs with gratitude, though she insisted on delivering professional invoices like any other vendor. No special treatment. Amid these challenges, their bond strengthened. They navigated the differences step by step, building trust. Mia started confiding in him about deeper worries: her fear of failure as an artist, her lingering anxiety about being overshadowed by his world. Pierce, in turn, admitted how lonely he felt among so-called friends who only valued him for deals or status. He shared childhood memories of an absent father and a mother who championed his talents, fueling his ambition to succeed. Money might have solved many external problems, but it never erased the emptiness he felt, the longing for genuine human connection. One day, he found a flyer in her apartment about an upcoming artist's showcase at a small gallery. She blushed when he asked about it, explaining she'd been invited to present a few pieces. "But it's tiny, not a big deal," she insisted, fiddling with the corners of the flyer. He gently pried the details out of her, learning it was a juried show, a potential stepping stone to bigger galleries. She was anxious about renting frames, printing high-quality copies, the whole ordeal. Without pushing, he offered, "I'd love to help you with any costs in the name of marketing your brand. Strictly business if you'd prefer a professional arrangement." Her first instinct was to refuse, but after a thoughtful pause, she relented. "If it's strictly business, I'll pay you back once I sell something. Deal?" He nodded, tamping down the urge to insist it was a gift. "Deal." The night of the showcase arrived. Mia was a bundle of nerves, wearing a tasteful dress, carrying her prints in a portfolio. Pierce drove her to the gallery. Well, Carl did. She fretted about how she'd never displayed her work in such a formal setting. Pierce reassured her, gently squeezing her hand. Inside, artists showcased paintings, sculptures, and digital art. Mia's corner displayed her whimsical illustrations. She arranged them carefully, lips pressed in concentration. Pierce watched from a discreet distance, letting her have the spotlight. He marveled at her skill. Her pieces exuded a gentle magic that could capture a child's sense of wonder. As the evening wore on, visitors trickled by, some pausing to admire her work. One or two expressed genuine interest in purchasing. Mia glowed with cautious excitement. Pierce noted how her posture changed, still shy, but brimming with pride whenever someone complimented her style. At one point, he overheard a man in a sharp suit praising her technique. Mia introduced herself politely. The man revealed he was a small publisher seeking illustrations for a new children's series. Pierce's heart pounded as Mia's eyes lit with hope. They exchanged cards, promising to follow up. After the man left, Mia turned to Pierce, her cheeks flushed with happiness. "Did you hear that? A real publisher. Maybe it's nothing, but—" She broke off, her voice trembling with excitement. Pierce smiled, chest tight with adoration. "It's something," he assured. "You're amazing, Mia. People are finally seeing it." She stepped close, hugging him in front of onlookers. He kissed the top of her head, ignoring any stares. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. That night, as they left the gallery, she managed to sell 3 prints and gather a handful of leads. She was practically glowing. Pierce insisted they celebrate with a simple dinner, just the two of them. Over candlelight at a quiet bistro, she beamed about the possibility of an actual illustration contract. He clasped her hand across the table, heart swelling with pride and affection. Their worlds were far from seamless, and challenges undoubtedly loomed. Yet with each success and every small step forward, they grew more certain that the love they nurtured was worth bridging any gap. Money, tabloids, status, none of it mattered as much as the bond forming between them, forged from chance, honesty, and a deepening belief in each other's dreams. Months slipped by in a gentle rhythm of incremental milestones. Mia secured a short-term contract with the children's book publisher, allowing her to pay bills without constant dread. She poured her heart into the project, often emailing Pierce excitedly about each new illustration completed. He, for his part, reveled in her joy, never tiring of her creative energy. In turn, Pierce confided in Mia about expansions in his empire, the philanthropic projects that drove him, and the burdens of always being in the public eye. She became his confidant, urging him to trust his instincts rather than bow to boardroom pressures. Her unwavering support gave him a renewed sense of purpose. They spent weekends toggling between her cozy apartment, where they'd cook, laugh at each other's culinary mishaps, and watch classic movies, and his penthouse, where she occasionally marveled at the panoramic skyline view, though she never let him spoil her overly. Over time, she began leaving small personal touches at his place. A favorite mug, a throw blanket she found comforting. He found himself cherishing those signs of her presence. Inevitably, the press took notice. A few tabloids ran stories speculating about the mystery girlfriend who had occasionally appeared by Pierce Warrington's side. But with careful planning and a bit of luck, the paparazzi never gained enough traction to harass Mia relentlessly. She still feared sudden intrusions into her privacy, but Pierce's protective measures held so far. One crisp autumn afternoon, Pierce invited Mia to accompany him to a philanthropic event at a local community center he helped fund. She'd see another aspect of his world, less glitzy than the gala, more hands-on. She agreed, intrigued by the chance to see him in a philanthropic setting without the pretense of high society. They arrived at the center, where volunteers ran programs for underprivileged youth, tutoring, sports, art sessions. Mia's eyes lit up at the art room where children doodled and painted. She joined a group, kneeling to admire a young girl's messy watercolor of a rainbow. Pierce stood nearby, watching with pride as Mia gently guided the girl to refine the colors, praising her imagination. Later, the center's director thanked Pierce for his ongoing support. He humbly brushed off the praise, redirecting attention to the staff's hard work. As they prepared to leave, Mia slipped her hand into his, face glowing. "That was amazing. You're helping so many kids." He shrugged, flushing. "They do the real work. I just provide funds." She shook her head. "Don't downplay it. This is real impact, far from the shallow image I feared. I'm proud of you." Touched, he leaned in to kiss her cheek. The center's director passed by, smiling at them, but they were too lost in each other's warmth to care. On the drive home, Mia stared out the window, expression thoughtful. "You know, for a while I was terrified of your world overshadowing me, but seeing this philanthropic side, it's inspiring, not intimidating." He squeezed her hand. "That means a lot. I've always wanted to do more than just accumulate money, though the board sometimes focuses on profit above all else." She turned, eyes alight. "Then keep going. Let them see your heart. You have the power to do incredible good. If we stand together, maybe it won't feel so lonely." His throat tightened at the emotion in her voice. "We," he repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." She smiled. "Me too." That night, back at his penthouse, they curled up on the sofa, a gentle fire crackling. Mia wore one of his button-down shirts over her leggings, arms wrapped around his waist. They gazed at the city lights, a silent promise pulsing between them. Without preamble, Pierce spoke his heart. "Mia, these past months have been the happiest I can remember. I know we still face challenges, media intrusion, bridging our backgrounds, but I love you, and I'd choose you, every single time." She lifted her face from his chest, eyes shining. "I love you too, Pierce, and I'm not going anywhere, as long as we keep each other's hearts first." He kissed her softly, sealing the declaration. In that moment, the swirling neon lights below seemed to pale in comparison to the radiance they shared. Wealth, status, fear of scandal, none of it mattered as much as this unwavering love. The call that started as a random missed dial had led them here, forging a bond deeper than either ever expected, and neither had any intention of letting it slip away. 6 months later, on a mild spring evening, Mia found herself perched on the edge of a familiar sofa, this time in Pierce's penthouse. A newly framed illustration hung on the wall, a whimsical cat gazing at a moon, the very print she'd gifted him at the street fair. It was a silent testament to how far they'd come. She scrolled through her phone, reading an email confirming that her children's book illustrations had been approved by the publisher. Her chest soared with pride. Across the room, Pierce watched her, a fond smile curving his lips. "I have a surprise," he said, setting aside his laptop. Her eyebrows rose. "Oh?" He patted the seat next to him. She approached, heart fluttering at the soft warmth in his gaze. He reached into a drawer, producing a small velvet box. Mia's breath caught. Could it be? Pierce opened the box to reveal a delicate ring, an elegant, understated piece with a single sparkling diamond. Her eyes misted. She didn't notice how large or small the diamond was, only that it shone with a quiet brilliance reminiscent of their love. "Mia," he began, voice trembling. "That night you called me by mistake. It changed my life. Healing. You brought me back to the real world, taught me how to feel again, and showed me there's more to life than money and power. I love you with everything I have. Will you marry me?" Tears slipped down her cheeks as she nodded, a laugh breaking through her sobs. "Yes, Pierce. 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and they dissolved into each other's arms, hearts pounding with joy. The moment felt both surreal and grounded in absolute truth. From that one wrong number, they'd found not just fleeting affection, but a genuine partnership that transcended class, expectation, and fear. Their wedding, held a few months later, was a beautiful blend of both worlds. A small ceremony at a botanical garden with only close friends, family, and a few business allies. Mia wore a simple white gown, gracefully carrying a bouquet of wildflowers. Pierce stood in a tailored suit, tears in his eyes, awaiting his bride. She approached him under a canopy of blossoms, and they spoke heartfelt vows that promised honesty, support, and unwavering love. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, they kissed to the sound of soft applause and the sweet strum of a violin. No paparazzi, no tabloid frenzy, just the quiet celebration of two lives intertwined. Afterwards, at a modest reception, Carl, the driver who'd rescued Mia that first stormy night, offered a toast. He joked about the most unexpected job assignment ever, praising how fate sometimes dialed the right number by mistake. Laughter filled the air, and even the stoic Pierce grinned from ear to ear. Their honeymoon was a blend of indulgence and simplicity. First, a romantic week on a private villa by the sea, Pierce's treat, then a road trip through quaint small towns where Mia collected sketches and inspirations. Everywhere they went, they carried the memory of how chance had brought them together. In the years that followed, Mia continued illustrating books and carving out her niche in the art world, while Pierce balanced his empire's demands with philanthropic efforts, often consulting Mia on ways to support creative youth. They never forgot that single phone call, its ring echoing through their memories as a symbol of life's whimsical generosity. Some nights, curled up in bed, Mia would tease him, "Imagine if I'd typed the number correctly. We might never have met." He'd gather her closer, replying, "Then I'm infinitely grateful you dialed wrong." She'd laugh, nestling into his arms, the diamond on her finger catching the dim light. "Me too, my accidental hero." In that hush, they'd drift off, content in the knowledge that the greatest gifts often arrive unplanned, through twists of fate and leaps of faith. A missed dial had led to genuine love, showing that sometimes the best stories begin with a single, unexpected ring of the phone.